will not speak on the issue of how COVID is dealing with schools, the curriculum, and the larger issue of access to education, because there are more accomplished people on this webinar who are better qualified to speak on these subjects. I'll leave it to them to address these issues. However, I am very concerned and have been so for over 30 years on the slow infiltration of the RS. This has been slow and insidious. It started a long time ago, even during the earlier Congress regimes. This is not something that has suddenly happened with the onset of the first NDA government, as well as the second and now third BJP NDA government. Also, education being a state subject, some Congress governments basically acted as the B team of the RSS in terms of lending a ear to the RSS propagandists in the form of saffronizing education. It's only in some states that there has been a vigorous fight back to the saffronizing of education. You are seeing a very concerted attempt at attack on education as we know it in terms of the contours of the Republican Constitution that we have. There is an attempt to destroy any Republican values, any democratic values, any secular values in this country. Please remember that the RSS stream of education is now a very large stream of education and is constantly increasing. They now run over 12,000 schools across the country. These are not the ECAL schools or one teacher schools, but regular schools at the middle school and the higher secondary level. Secondly, in many states, the saffronization of the textbooks has gone from strength to strength. Very few states have done a vigorous fight back using educational platforms, civil society platforms, and senior educational academics. Karnataka is a good example where there has been a vigorous attempt to fight back. If there are other examples at the state level, I would be very happy to be educated. There is an attempt to clearly take away the concept of federalism in this country. There is an attempt to create a unitary state because fascism and Hindutva is one version of it, one incarnation of it. It is clearly seeks to create a Hindu Hindustan, which needs to destroy federalism and the federal secular fabric of this country. So the knowledge of federalism is clearly forbidden and must be erased from the memory. That's why the encroachment of the central government into the education sector at the state level has been gathering a pace for many years, and it needs to be resisted. The complete evisceration of any scientific knowledge through the teaching of science or history or geography is gathering a pace in a big way. We all of us are well-informed people, so I do not need to go chapter and verse on what Mr. Dinanath Batra and others seek to do. But clearly you can see how they want to remove any mention of citizenship because of how they want to gerrymander the citizenship process through the CAA and the NRC process. And that's why in the new class 11 syllabus, it has been mentioned that citizenship and nationalism uh, have been deleted because their nationalism is clearly uh, premised on one faith, which we as secular Indians do not accept. Social sciences, very important for the spirit of inquiry and the to be inculcated in the student, and clearly subsections like why do you need local governments or the growth of local governments in India have been removed from the curricula again, once again, because they believe in a unitary state. They believe everything should be ruled by and from Delhi, and they have no iota of an idea of a diverse India, multicultural India, an India that has to be inclusive in every form, and education just being one. So the students in the class 10 will not be studying democracy and even diversity because they refuse to accept diversity. They all expect us to kowtow and genuflect to their concept of one popular Hindutva identity, which even negates the role of the hundreds of Hindu sects in India, forget other religions. Uh, Caste is given just bare mention, and that also is going to be done away with. When that is the principal contradiction in India, whether you like it or not, and unless you solve that, social stratification will remain as it is, and we will not be able to go forward in our attempts to mobilize the majority of the population towards social change. Uh, Popular struggles and movements is also been sought to be done away with because these people who did never participated in the freedom movement paid lip service to other democratic movements or did not participate in them at all are clearly at a disadvantage here, and they want to only project their Weltanschauung or worldview. Food security has been removed in the class 9 syllabus, and the concept is clearly that the poor have no rights because their own constituencies are big traders in the food and grain sector, and they want to see food rights, the right to food, as charity rather than as a right which has to be acquired through struggle. And understanding partition is something again that is being done away with because they will then once again attempt to put forward their point of view. Their whole concept is what they said long time ago about education: Indianize, nationalize, and spiritualize. And they've been saying this for a lot of time. In fact, in January of 2020, they held a very major meeting of all the RSS ideologues on the new education policy, criticized the present government in not being urgent enough in their attitude towards getting through the new education policy. You see all this happening now because of the push that is coming in from the RSS. In tandem with the RSS, and Professor Rampal is much better placed to speak on this issue, is that education is sought to be privatized, even in non-BJP states, like in Delhi under the AAP administration. Education cannot and should not be privatized. The whole attempt to have distance learning through computers and smartphones takes millions of children outside the pale of getting education. So this must be again fought so that and a proper response needs to be done. The whole concept that we need to look at is go back to some of the concepts that Gandhiji talked about Nair Talim in his Nair Talim program. Subsequent to independence, Professor Yashpal and others, and most recently Professor Rampal in a very informative articles in a number of places, including a popular journal like The Wire, I think are very instructive for the common person to understand how this is being done. The question is, we're not talking about theoretically. Already the textbook gerrymandering of the process is far advanced. And unless we fight it, not just in Gujarat, where Mr. Batra did his gerrymandering in a big manner, but in Madhya Pradesh, where it was aborted for a little time because of a non-BJP government, but it is back to square one, where they are going to be teaching a lot of Hindutva jargon and blah, 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 instead of any proper scientific temper education. The Karnataka, what can we do? I mean, we can't wait for the non-BJP governments to stand up and get their act together. This is the least of their priorities, because they have no eyesight, foresight, or hindsight. The Karnataka model of creating alternative scrutiny mechanisms, civil society mechanisms, educational mechanisms composed of academics and teachers and others interested in the subject needs to be looked at. And copies of all the new textbooks should be scrutinized carefully by the academics and experts for a proper, thorough vetting of all the attempts to create this new kind of saffronization of education. This dissemination of the critique should be in the public domain and should be available to parents in particular, but also to a much wider audience. The details or the backgrounds or the CVs or the biodatas of all the members of the so-called official textbook drafting committees should be widely publicized. The average citizen in this country should be aware of what is the qualifications of the functionaries put on these drafting committees. It's like the present chairperson of the Indian Center for Historical Research. He has absolutely no qualifications to be where he is. It's clearly a political appointment, and this is what is going to happen sooner than later in all the other educational institutions if we are not vigilant. States must, as according to the Karnataka scrutiny committees, set up textbook councils, state textbook councils. It will be some kind of a vigilance body, as they state, to monitor not only the textbooks taught in the public schools, but also to be scrutinize the textbooks taught in schools outside the government system. And this is very important because Madhya Pradesh in the last BJP government talked of setting up a board, parallel board for the BJP, for the RSS run schools, which would hold their own examinations and give their own certificates, and which would be valid. This is extremely a dangerous thing. So this council, textbook council idea is a very good idea. It should be a completely free from all state interference, but could act as a complaints authority. This is absolutely important. The poor quality saffronized books, wherever possible in states where they are non-BJP governments, should be highlighted and should be withdrawn immediately from the teaching curriculum. The existing textbook committees which have been saffronized must be reconstituted with such educationists as are committed to the NCF 2005. And this is a work in progress. Constantly suggestions and recommendations from the public as well as independent educationists should be called for, so that uh, uh, there is constant public scrutiny. All independent, all the books, textbooks should be offered for scrutiny by, by a committee of independent experts. So the entire process, as the Karnataka program says, should be very, very transparent. I believe that we need to look at the macro picture. There is an attempt by a cabal of saffron ideologues to take over the whole Indian state. And whether it be in education, whether it be in running the state apparatus, whether it be in taking the army school, military apparatus, the attempt to create military schools in parallel to the state Sainik schools run by the RSS. There's a whole worldview that the RSS has. Unless we also understand that there is a worldview and offer an alternate worldview, only attacking them in the area of saffronization of education, while useful, will not be adequate. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.